Hi Year 2 students, hope all is well with you. This week the problem that's been discussed for you is a young patient presenting with intermittent claudication pain and was observed to have severe atherosclerosis. The main component of atherosclerotic plaque that often gets deposited in the blood vessel is lipids. Hence, individuals with such hyperlipidemia or with such altered lipids will often require certain drugs to control their dyslipidemia. Hence, this resource session has been scheduled to prime you about the key points that you need to keep in mind with regard to this drug class. I am sure the biochemist must have talked about the various types of hyperlipidemia or dyslipidemia according to Fredrickson classification, which has from 1 till 5. Just briefly, the 1 and the 5, they are very rare, often associated with altered chylomicrons, and treatment may not be needed. So, the ones that are of clinical importance are 2, 3 and 4 types. Of these, 2 is mainly associated with rise in LDL, 3 IDL and 4 VLDL. So, you could see a gradient, low, intermediate, very low. So, there is a gradient that you could keep in mind. So, these are the main lipoprotein abnormalities that you will see, and all these 2, 3, 4 have certain degree of high risk of atheroma, and therefore, they certainly need one or more drug classes to control their dyslipidemic state. Further, the type 2 is subdivided into 2A and 2B. 2 means LDL has to be increased, so that is common. If you have a VLDL together with LDL, then it is 2B. With regard to the drug classes, we will see the individual class, and then and there I will make a mention about which drug class is preferred in which types of dyslipidemia. These are the 4 important categories of drugs that are used often in dyslipidemia. Statins, the first and the foremost, which is often given as primary prevention and also in certain subgroup of patients for secondary prevention. Bile acid resins, hardly it is given alone, mostly it is combined with statins. Nicotinic acid derivative or niacin and fibric acid derivatives. So, these are the 4 major drug classes used for treating dyslipidemia, and these 2 drugs are often combined with statins for additional hypolipidemic property. So, they are never given standalone, at least ezetimibe is not given standalone. Alirocumab has one indication as a standalone, meaning it is given alone, not with not as an add-on therapy, but otherwise usually these 2 are given as add-ons. Let us see the individual drug classes, the first being statins. Statins mostly affect the cholesterol synthesis. If you see the cholesterol that we have it in the body, we obtain it from exogenous source from the dietary fat that gets absorbed from the intestine and then to the chylomicron into the circulation, and then it is utilized for various lipoprotein synthesis. We also synthesize cholesterol in our body. We have certain enzymes that are preparing cholesterol from various precursor molecules. Can you name one molecule that has a very high content of cholesterol that is circulating in the plasma? Yes, LDL cholesterol. So, our liver, consider this as a liver cell. A liver cell is called hepatocyte. Our liver on the surface expresses certain receptors through which the circulating LDL is bound, internalized and degraded. When it is degraded, you have lot of precursor molecules from which finally cholesterol is synthesized. There are, I think, nearly 20 steps involved from the molecule, from the first molecule till the cholesterol synthesis happens, and I am not going through the entire chain of cholesterol synthesis, but what is clinically and pharmacologically more important is this step. One of the pre-final steps involve conversion of a molecule called 3-hydroxy 3-methyl glutaryl CoA to mevalonic acid, and this reaction is mediated by the enzyme hydroxy methyl glutaryl CoA reductase, shortly HMG CoA reductase. So, when you give any statin, its primary job is to go to the liver, find this enzyme and inhibit this enzyme. So, when this enzyme is inhibited, you hinder the chain of cholesterol synthesis and you reduce the amount of cholesterol that's present or that's synthesized by the liver. But if you remember physiology, cholesterol is also essential for the synthesis of bile acids, and there are various hormones that require, including the steroid hormones, that required cholesterol as one of the main chain. So, if you, by giving statins, you are reducing the cholesterol content of the liver, liver by any means have to synthesize cholesterol so that it is able to produce bile acids as well as it is able to support the synthesis of other hormones that are dependent on cholesterol. So, what will it do? It will increase the expression of LDL receptors on the surface. So, you inhibit cholesterol, but liver has to synthesize cholesterol by any means. So, to increase the synthesis, it increases the amount of LDL receptor that it expresses on the surface. Normally, hypothetically, in the absence of statin, if there are 5 LDL receptors in a hepatocyte, if you are giving statins, it might become 10, 15, 50, any amount. So, by increasing the number of LDL receptors, more LDL from the blood will be degraded, and that will try to compensate for the cholesterol that is inhibited by statins. Now, by ultimately using statins, what is happening to the LDL quantity in the blood? It reduces. So, that is the main activity of statins. Also, when you reduce cholesterol, you also reduce the synthesis of VLDL in the liver. So, there is a reduction in the VLDL that is released into the circulation following administration of statins. So, this is very important for you to understand the mechanism. How does statin group of drugs act, and what is the predominant lipoprotein that is affected? It is LDL, and the main mechanism is inhibition of the enzyme called HMG-CoA reductase. Thereby, you endogenously prevent the synthesis of cholesterol. Another way of obtaining cholesterol is from LDL. So, the liver increases the expression of LDL receptors. So, LDL is degraded, and that cholesterol is used for supporting the essential functions like bile acid synthesis and certain hormones. Got it? In addition to these effects on the lipids, the statins have several other effects which are not directly related to either liver or cholesterol synthesis, and these are referred to as pleiotropic effects. Particularly, these effects are observed at higher doses of statins. For example, a higher dose of statin was observed to have anti-inflammatory effect, as well as it also inhibits platelet aggregation, and it also promotes vasodilation by increased nitric oxide. So, all these will tend to stabilize the atherosclerotic plaque, and thereby the chances of plaque rupture and subsequent formation of a thrombi will be less. So, that is why we will be seeing in maybe second or third from this resource session a patient with myocardial infarction. So, where one of the drugs that is given is high dose of statins, and particularly it is for this effect, pleiotropic effect. We prefer to give high dose of statins for such patients with acute thrombotic attack or severe atherosclerotic plaque. So, these are all pleiotropic effects of statins. So, put together, the main effect of statin is going to be on the lipids. Particularly, it is going to decrease the LDL cholesterol to an extent of around 20 to 50%, which is very good. In fact, statins have the maximum reduction in LDL cholesterol. They also reasonably decrease the synthesis of triglycerides. It's reasonable, 10 to 35% is reasonable, but they have a very modest effect, only slight effect on improving HDL cholesterol. So, basically statins are very good if a patient has increased LDL. Most often it would be mixed type of hyperlipidemia, where along with LDL they may also have increased triglycerides. So, statins could help in controlling both. With regard to HDL, statins have a modest effect. Now, going back to the Fredrickson classification, because statins are very good in LDL reduction, which type of hyperlipidemia is mainly characterized by abnormal LDL? Yes, type 2. So, that is why statins are preferred in type 2 hyperlipidemia. There are nearly half a dozen of statins available, but the most commonly used ones are atorvastatin, rosuvastatin and simvastatin. So, these are the three commonly used statins. The most common of these is atorvas. This is the very commonly used one in clinical practice. Of these three, both atorvastatin and rosuvastatin, they are longer acting. Their half life is approximately 20 to 24 hours. So, I am sorry. So, they are so long acting compared to simvastatin, whose half life is just 2 to 4 hours. What is the clinical significance of knowing this duration of action? If you see the physiological rhythm, I am sure you all remember this picture. Could you recollect where you have seen this? Yes, in the topic of antihypertensives, right, where I was referring to this section of the figure, where you have increased sympathetic, angiotensin, vasoconstriction, all happening in the early morning phase. Now, I am going to refer to this side of the figure of the biological clock, which is concerned with synthesis of lipids. The liver has maximum rate of lipid synthesis happening in the night time. So, particularly between 12 to 5 o'clock is when the liver has maximum rate of synthesis of cholesterol and triglycerides. So, if you are giving atorvastatin or rosuvastatin, whose half life is pretty long, right, close to 24 hours, it does not matter whether the patient takes it in the morning or afternoon or evening or bedtime, does not matter, still therapeutic concentrations of these drugs will be there in the circulation. So, at midnight they'll be able to inhibit the cholesterol synthesis when it is maximum. On the other hand, let's assume you are giving simvastatin. Simvastatin half-life is just 2 to 4 hours. So, with such short duration, it should only be given at night. If the patient takes it in the morning or in the afternoon, then between 12 p.m. Between 12 midnight and 5 a.m. when the synthesis is maximum, patient will hardly have any therapeutic concentration of simvastatin, and so despite taking the dose, the patient may not have appropriate therapeutic effect. So, whenever you prescribe statins, please keep this point in mind. Atorvastatin, rosuvastatin does not matter, the administration time does not matter, but for simvastatin it has to be given at night time. Another significant point that you need to keep in mind with regard to statins, as well as one other drug class, we will be seeing it in a while, is their hepatic metabolism. So, if you take the common ones, atorvastatin and simvastatin, they are metabolized by 3A4, rosuvastatin 2C9. Could you recollect where we have talked about CYP2C9 earlier? Good, warfarin, right? So, warfarin has two enantiomers, S and R. S is 3 times more potent than R, and that S isomer is metabolized by 2C9, and there I have introduced you a terminology called pharmacogenetics, the genetic differences that is causing variation in the drug response. Good. So, of these 3 drugs that we commonly use it in statins, please keep in mind CYP3A4 metabolizes atorvas and simvastatin, and 2C9 for rosuvastatin. Why should I keep this in mind? As a clinician, what is the significance of this? Remember, if you go back and read your basics, taking you to unit 1 probably, where we have a term called biotransformation, right, in the liver, particularly in the liver, which is done by phase 1 enzymes and phase 2 enzymes. CYP3A4 is responsible for approximately 50% of the drug's metabolism in the body. So, if I am giving, let us say, 4 drugs to a patient, there is a high probability that at least 2 of the 4 drugs that I am giving it to that patient is likely to undergo metabolism by CYP3A4. In fact, this enzyme metabolizes the maximum number of drugs that we have in the world. If that is the case, if you are giving either atorvas or simvastatin, very well there is a possibility to encounter drug-drug interaction. So, you need to be aware of drugs which inhibit CYP3A4 as well as those drugs which increases its expression, inducers. Inducers are very easy to keep in mind. Always, although you are yet to know about the names, of course, only name that you may be familiar until now is rifampicin, which is often used for tuberculosis. We also have certain anti-epileptics called carbamazepine, which we have seen it in patients with acute rheumatic fever. If you can recollect, C for C, I told you, chorea. If a patient has chorea during acute rheumatic fever, carbamazepine can very well control it. Nevertheless, it is an anti-epileptic. We will be seeing it in detail in unit 8. Similarly goes phenobarbital, another anti-epileptic in unit 8. So, these are the common inducers. With regard to inhibitors, keep in mind amiodarone, which is an anti-arrhythmic. We will be seeing it in the last research session of pharmacology in this unit. Then our famous macrolides, erythromycin, clarithromycin. So, these are some of CYP3A4 inhibitors and inducers. Whenever you are writing a drug in a patient who is already receiving statin, make sure that you are writing a drug that has low risk of drug to drug interaction. So, this is a point I want to make it clear to you. Check the whatever the PDF you have, whatever app you have, check whether that drug we are going to prescribe has an interaction. If so, either change to another drug or use it with utmost precaution. When you give statins, there are certain adverse effects that you need to monitor, you need to tell the patient, inform the patient, so that they are aware of the early signs and then get back to you, so that you could prevent some catastrophic life threatening problems. So, we have a mnemonic for statins, adverse effects to remember. Statins, how do they act? Their primary mechanism is HMG-CoA reductase inhibitors, right. So, this is the short form. The same one you could use it for keeping in mind their adverse effects. H for liver toxicity. A few years before, I think 2 years before, hepatotoxicity was one of the serious adverse effects attributed to statin use, but subsequently it was found out that it was not because of statins, but it is because of the metabolic disorder. Patients often have such deranged liver function. Initially, the FDA was making it a mandatory to check liver function test before initiating statins and at serial time points following statin administration. But recently, because of this association which was not proven, FDA has removed that mandate from the statins label. However, you should keep in mind that statins can cause hepatotoxicity, that is for H. M, patients receiving statins often complain that they have pain at the back, they have myalgia, they feel very tired. So, myopathy is another very common, not serious, but commonly observed side effect. You need to counsel the patient, and with that you could maintain the compliance. G for gastrointestinal, again not serious but common. C for cataract, and very important one is rhabdomyolysis, which can be life threatening and often detected by doing this investigation, creatine phosphokinase. An elevation of this enzyme beyond 5 times the upper limit of normal often indicates rhabdomyolysis, which is life threatening. Patient should not be given high dose of statins, and this is also more common if statins are administered together with gemfibrocil. We will be seeing this. This is a fibric acid derivative which is very good in causing reduction of triglycerides. So, when you have a patient with mixed dyslipidemia with raised LDL and triglycerides, you may often have to combine a statin with fibric acid derivative, and if you are using gemfibrocil from the fibric acid class, the risk of rhabdomyolysis myopathy is very high. We have another drug called fenofibrate in the same fibric acid class, which is much safer to combine with statins. So, if at all you have a situation where you need to combine a statin with a fibric acid derivative, go for fenofibrate and certainly not gemfibrocil. This is life threatening, so better to avoid it. The last I stands for increased incidence of diabetes, which is unproven. So, which is not certain. There are few studies which have shown an increased risk. Similarly, few studies have shown an increased risk of memory loss with statins use. Few other studies have opposed it. So, until now we do not have any concrete evidence that statin use increases memory loss or statin use increases the risk of diabetes, but this may change in future. Until now this is the status. All right. When do we use statins? What are the indications? As in the case, a patient who has been diagnosed with any atherosclerotic disorder, you may have to use statins so that you prevent the further worsening of atherosclerotic plaque, as well as the statins will also help to stabilize the atherosclerosis due to its pleiotropic effects. So, this is for patients with established atherosclerotic disorders as a secondary prevention. You do not want any thrombotic attack, you do not want any further worsening that leads to necrosis, gangrene, right. So, this is secondary prevention. But if you have an asymptomatic patient and he does a routine checkup and then his LDL is beyond 190 milligrams percentage, then again statins are indicated. But here the patient does not have any problem. So, you are trying to give it so that you prevent atherosclerotic plaque and its worsening as a primary prevention. In case that patient is a diabetic in the age range of 40 to 75, then you may have to consider initiating statins even at much lower LDL levels. When it is above 100, that is an indication for starting statins. So, to summarize the essential points about statins, you need to keep 3 drugs in mind: atorvastatin, rosuvastatin, simvastatin. The difference is atorvas and rosuvas are longer acting, time of administration does not matter. Simvastatin is shorter acting, has to be necessarily administered at night time. Statins act by inhibiting the enzyme HMG-CoA reductase. Thereby, they disrupt the endogenous cholesterol synthesis, and that increases the expression of LDL receptors on the liver, and more LDL is sequestered and degraded. So, thereby their primary effect is going to be reduction in LDL. They also have a reasonable effect on reducing VLDL and a modest effect in increasing HDL cholesterol. In addition to hypolipidemic effects, statins have pleiotropic effects, which is anti-inflammatory, reduces aggregation of platelets, increases production of nitric oxide, and all these will help to stabilize the atherosclerotic plaque and reduce thrombotic attack. We use statins for patients with established atherosclerotic plaque as a secondary prevention, and for patients with raised LDL as primary prevention. For experiencing the pleiotropic effects of statin, it has to be given at higher doses. Statins adverse effects, keep the mnemonic in mind, of which rhabdomyolysis is serious. Most often you encounter at higher doses of statins, particularly in combination with fibric acid derivative. So, these are the key important points that you need to keep in mind for statins. Moving to the next drug class, which is bile acid sequestrants. Some textbooks do say it as bile acid resins. So, it does not matter, both are referring to the same class of drugs. The bile acid sequestrants are in fact the oldest and the safest lipid lowering drugs that we know. Only drawback is it is very less potent compared to the other drugs. Potency refers to the dose that is required for exhibiting certain activity. So, if you take atorvastatin for example to see LDL reduction, you can observe it as low as 10 milligrams a day. Of course, in high dose you can even go to 80 milligrams, but as low as 10 you could observe its LDL reduction activity. But with regard to any of the bile acid sequestrants except for the most recently discovered one, they usually have to be given in several grams. So, that is why we often say that bile acid sequestrants are less potent compared to the other drug classes. On the other hand, if you see its mechanism, how it acts, in fact, the bile acid sequestrants are highly charged molecule, they are highly positively charged molecule, and when a patient takes it orally, it binds to the bile acids that is released from the into the intestine from the liver through the bile. And bile acids, you must be knowing from physiology that they have an extensive enterohepatic circulation. So, if let us assume liver releases 100 molecules of bile acids, after doing its job in the intestine, almost 90 to 95 of them will return back to the liver through the enterohepatic circulation. So, 90 to 95% of the out of 100, 90 to 95 will come back. So, when the liver is synthesizing next time, it has to hardly produce only 5 to 10 more molecule, and that will add up to this 90 to 95, and that will be released back into the intestine. So, this is what is normally happening physiologically. But now, if you give any of the bile acid sequestrant, what happens is it binds to the bile acids and it will not allow it to be reabsorbed. It will reduce the enterohepatic circulation. So, now with the use of bile acid sequestrants, maybe only 50% or less of the bile acids go back to the liver. So, now what will happen? The liver has to synthesize another 50% every time, so that it has to, and it will release into the intestine. So, now from 5 to 10, the liver has to increase the synthesis of bile acids. Now, what are bile acids made up of? One of the essential constituent of the bile acid is cholesterol. So, if the liver has to increase the bile acid synthesis, then it needs more cholesterol. And how does it obtain more cholesterol? What is the source from which more cholesterol is pulled out? Same, circulating LDL. So, it increases the expression of LDL receptors, circulating LDL will be sequestered, from that cholesterol will be mobilized and it will be used for increased bile acid synthesis. So, ultimately with the use of bile acid sequestrants, again as like statins, the predominant lipoprotein that will be affected is LDL cholesterol. So, there will be a reduction in the LDL cholesterol. Got it? Just to simplify, bile acid sequestrants are highly charged molecules. When taken orally, they bind to the bile acids, they reduce the enterohepatic circulation. So, liver will have to synthesize more bile acids. One of the essential constituents of bile acid is cholesterol. So, if there is more bile acid being synthesized, more cholesterol will be required, and so more LDL will be destroyed from the circulation. So, ultimately you get reduction in LDL cholesterol. These are the three available bile acid sequestrants in use: cholestyramine, cholestyramine, these are traditional very old drugs. Cholesyvalum is a recent addition in this drug class, which in fact is also indicated for treating diabetes mellitus. It has an approved indication. So, when you are using a bile acid sequestrant, as like statins, you will observe a reduction in LDL. Of course, not to that extent of around 50% that you will see with the statins, but reasonably 20 to 30%. So, that is why it is the second most efficacious drug class following statins in reducing LDL cholesterol. It is not used as a standalone drug. Usually it is preferred in patients who are already receiving statins and they are not having the satisfactory reduction in LDL cholesterol. So, in such patients you may add bile acid sequestrants and you may expect a greater reduction in LDL. Second, you might have some patients on statins who have certain adverse events which are intolerable. In that case, you cannot go for higher doses of statins. So, you may have to maintain them at lower tolerable dose of statin, and in addition you can add one of the bile acid resins. So, that might again reduce LDL. Third, a pregnant. In a pregnant, if you want to use a drug that reduces LDL cholesterol, statins might cross the blood placental barrier and might result in congenital anomalies. Bile acid sequestrants, because they are never absorbed, remember they never get absorbed, their primary role is to stay in the gastrointestinal tract and reduce the reabsorption of bile acids. So, it is much safer in a pregnant and in a child. So, these are some of the advantages of bile acid sequestrants. However, bile acid sequestrants might either increase the VLDL in a patient or it might not do anything. If it does not do anything, it is okay, but if it increases, it is going to pose another problem. Particularly in patients who already have raised VLDL, this is going to further increase the lipid constituent. So, that is why we do not prefer bile acid sequestrants in patients with type 2 hyperlipidemia, where you have both LDL and VLDL raised. Also, bile acid sequestrants are not that effective in patients who do not have LDL receptors at all. So, familial homozygous hypercholesterolemia. So, these are some of the differences with bile acid sequestrants. Bile acid sequestrants does not get absorbed from GIT. That does not mean it does not cause any adverse effects, it does. In fact, almost all patients on bile acid sequestrants will have at least one of these adverse side effects. They will often complain of distended abdomen with flatulence. They may have reduced absorption of fat soluble vitamins that increases the risk of gallstones, and bile acids, if you go back to your physiology, you would recollect that they are very good inhibitors of endogenous triglyceride synthesis. So, if you are using a bile acid sequestrant, what is happening to bile acid? It is reducing, and that will contribute to hypertriglyceridemia, and when the triglycerides rise above 500, you have increased risk of pancreatitis. So, these are some of the adverse effects that you may have to keep in mind with regard to bile acid sequestrants, and because they are very charged molecule, whenever you concomitantly administer a drug, they often bind to such drugs, more often it is anionic drugs, and they decrease their absorption. There are a lot of drug interactions, particularly with regard to narrow therapeutic index, and in unit 3 keep these in mind: digoxin, warfarin. Thyroxine in unit 4 will be seen. So, whenever you give bile acid sequestrant, minimum 4 to 6 hours gap is essential between the time of administration of bile acid sequestrant and any of these drugs. So, in that way you may reduce the drug to drug interactions. So, with regard to bile acid sequestrants, the key points are: bile acid sequestrants are highly charged molecules, bind to bile acids, reduce enterohepatic circulation, that increases the synthesis of bile acids in the liver. So, increased requirement for cholesterol, so increased LDL degradation. They may increase VLDL or they may not do anything to it. Bile acid sequestrants are often used as add-on therapy with statins. They are safe in a pregnant and in children. Not suitable for patients with 2B hyperlipidemic disorder as well as homozygous familial hypercholesterolemia. Because of charged molecule, they often interact with other drugs, and you need to give certain time gap to avoid these interactions. The third drug class for dyslipidemia are the fibric acid derivatives. There are again half a dozen molecules, but please keep these two in mind. Commonly used: fenofibrate and gemfibrocil. fibric acid derivatives, they mainly stimulate the vascular lipoprotein lipase. So, lipoprotein lipase, which reduces the circulating triglycerides. So, if you want to remember one key point with regard to the change in the lipoprotein that you will see with the use of fibric acid derivative, please keep in mind they are very good reducers of triglycerides. That is the key lipoprotein change that you will observe with fibric acid derivatives. VLDL, by activating lipoprotein lipase in the blood vessels. Another important point with regard to mechanism is fibric acid derivatives are activators of peroxisome proliferator activated receptor alpha. Have you heard this term before in any of the previous pharmacology sessions? In unit 3, clue, one of the antihypertensives. Got it? No? All right. One of the drug class that interacts with renin angiotensin aldosterone system. Got it? No? All right. One of the angiotensin receptor blockers. Got it? No? All right. Telmisartan. Right? Of course, telmisartan is not PPAR alpha, it actually PPAR gamma. So, these two are different forms of the PPAR. Gamma is more often related to glucose control, alpha is more often related to lipid control. So, fibric acid derivatives are activators of PPAR alpha, which again gives it an additional activity of increased HDL, and some studies say there is increased LDL, some studies do support its effect on lowering LDL cholesterol. But if I say triglyceride, the first point that you should keep in mind is they are very good in reducing triglycerides. And where are triglycerides elevated? According to Fredrickson classification, which type? Good. Type 3 and 4, and also you get to see in type 2b. So, these are the main types which are indications for starting any of the fibric acid derivatives. And I told you there are two fibric acid names that you need to keep in mind: gemfibrosal fenofibrate. What are the important points? Gemfibrosal we have seen earlier, it increases the risk of rhabdomyolysis, particularly when you use with statins, and so best to be avoided. Fenofibrate is the safest to combine with statins, and it is also the fibric acid derivative which has maximum reduction, which causes maximum reduction in LDL cholesterol. So, that will support the statins therapeutic effect of reducing LDL. In addition, fenofibrate increases the excretion of uric acid. So, it is also preferred if you have a patient with gout or hyperuricemia. There are two more similarities with statins. Fibric acid derivatives undergo metabolism by the same enzyme. So, when you are combining with statins, again both will undergo metabolism by the same enzyme. So, you may have to often titrate the dose, and they also share the hepatotoxic risk with statins. So to summarize the key points for fibric acid derivatives, they mainly stimulate vascular or endothelial lipoprotein lipase and cause reduction in triglycerides. They are also activators of PPAR alpha. They increase HDL to some extent. Some studies say there is a reduction in LDL, some say there is increase in LDL. They are the best with regard to reducing triglycerides. That's the key point that you need to keep in mind. And with statins, gemfibrozil should never be added. Fenofibrate is the safest. They also have CYP3A4 metabolism and share hepatotoxicity. They are preferred in type 3, 4 and 2B hyperlipidemic states. The last major drug class for dyslipidemia is niacin, which is a combination of nicotinic acid and nicotinamide, which is vitamin B3. When you give niacin, it inhibits the adipose tissue lipase enzyme, lipoprotein lipase in adipose tissue. So thereby it reduces the free fatty acid that is delivered to liver. So reduced triglycerides, reduced VLDL, reduced LDL. And niacin also reduces HDL degradation. So it prolongs the half-life of circulating LDL. So it finally increases LDL levels in the blood. So niacin, if you see, it has a reduction in VLDL, reduce LDL, increase HDL, and so it is one of the broad spectrum hypolipidemic drug. And of all the drugs that increases HDL, niacin causes the maximum increase in HDL cholesterol. Do you know which other non-pharmacological entity or measure will increase HDL maximum? Exercise. So niacin is as good as exercise in increasing HDL levels in the blood. Very good, fascinating, isn't it? On the other hand, niacin is very toxic. It looks attractive because it increases HDL, decreases LDL, VLDL, or bad cholesterols are reduced, good cholesterol is increased. On the other hand, it has lot of adverse problems, not only in numbers, in terms of its seriousness. You see, it can cause hypersensitivity reaction, it can cause hepatotoxicity serious, it can increase the risk of diabetes, increase the risk of gout, increase the risk of, it has cutaneous problems. So because of all these adverse effects, niacin is not preferred as a first line drug. Mostly the experts would choose a subgroup of patients who do not respond to other drugs. Then they may consider initiating niacin as add-on. So with that, we complete the major drug classes used for hyperlipidemia. There are two more drugs, individual drugs, which are used as add-on, right? So they are combined with statins. The first is ezetimibe. If you recollect statins, what do statins do? They inhibit HMG-CoA reductase in the liver. So they increase the LDL receptor expression and more LDL is taken in and degraded. Now, after few months of use of statins, what might happen is the body would develop a alternate mechanism or alternate escape of increasing the absorption of cholesterol from the diet. Because you have inhibited endogenous synthesis by using statins, the body would need more cholesterol. So initially to take from LDL, but after few months it would also increase the dietary absorption of cholesterol. So when this happens, it reduces the uptake of cholesterol from LDL. So what will happen now to LDL? The LDL will start to increase. So now this is where you may have to introduce ezetimibe. So if you combine with ezetimibe, ezetimibe inhibits dietary absorption of cholesterol. When you're combining with statin, statin will take care of endogenous synthesis. Ezetimibe will take care of reducing exogenous cholesterol. So both will control LDL cholesterol. So this is used as add-on after few months of use of statins. The last drug that I want to mention, because this is given to the current patient, is alirocumab. In the hepatocyte, you have a protein called PCSK9, which, just remember that this protein will bind to the LDL receptor and it will not allow the LDL receptor to be expressed on the hepatic surface. If LDL receptors are not expressed, then the LDL will not be sequestrated, and that results in increased LDL, which is what is happening in the patient. In such patients, you could use what is called as a monoclonal antibody to these proteins, and this antibody will bind to the proteins and it will not allow to reduce LDL receptor. So more LDL receptors will be expressed and that will sequester LDL, and finally it results in reduction in LDL cholesterol. So this is often preferred as a standalone molecule in patients with heterozygous familial hypercholesterolemia. It is also used as add-on, as in the present patient, along with statins and ezetimibe. So that will add to their reduction in LDL cholesterol. So with this, I complete this session on drugs for dyslipidemia. So just to brief, statins are very good in LDL reduction. Also they cause reduction in VLDL, are modest in HDL. Bile acid sequestrants are very good in LDL reduction. They are often used in combination with statins. VLDL can increase or will not change. They can result in hypertriglyceridemia. Fibric acid derivatives are very good in reducing triglycerides. Some amount of increase in HDL is observed. With regard to LDL, it is inconclusive. Niacin is best for increasing HDL. Some amount of reduction in LDL and VLDL is observed, but on the contrary, adverse effect profile is totally unfavorable for its use as first line drug. Ezetimibe, alirocumab, usually combined with statins for additional hypolipidemic activity on LDL cholesterol. So these are the answers for the last session MCQs that I have provided. I think it was on anticoagulants, oral and parenteral. And as like before, I have few MCQs for this session as well. Go through it. And if you have any questions, feel free to approach me. Thank you and take care. Keep safe.